Before we begin with the bizarre update involving Nuno Loureiro and Neves Valente, does anybody find this weird? Just a little bit?
The conference, but there are three main things that are happening here. The first thing that's happening is grief, and you can see from behind me, this is a recreation of the tent where Charlie Kirk lost his life at Utah University in September, and people are taking selfies with it. You can see all around people are saying, like, for Charlie. They're wearing replicas of the shirt that Charlie Kirk was wearing when he was. So there's that moment. The second thing that's happening.
So yeah, at this Turning Point USA conference, this 4-day event called America Fest, they put up this recreation of the booth where Charlie Kirk was supposedly shot, and people are wearing his shirt that he was wearing that day to take selfies in. Now look, I don't need people to flat out agree with me when it comes to the things I talk about. Matter of fact, I have said time and time again, across all of my channels, what I talk about is basically my own opinions. These are basically my journals. If you disagree with me, fine. I like to hear it. I'm very interactive in the comment section, but can we at least meet in the middle here and say that this is a little weird? This comes off like some kind of strange, bizarre ritual. It would be like months after JFK got popped and his wife Jackie held an event and had a replica of the limo and told people, wear a suit that matches JFK's suit, sit in the limo and say cheese. It would be weird. Something else I want to go ahead and talk about as well has to do with Steven Spielberg's latest movie called Disclosure Day. A few days ago, the trailer came out and supposedly it has to do about aliens and UFOs. Now, it would seem like birds play an important role in this movie. In a couple scenes we're shown birds, but also in the poster we're shown a bird and the one-eyed symbolism inside a bird. One of the main characters becomes possessed and she starts to make this noise, which many people believe may be the sound of the alien.
Let's today is today's
And I find it very odd because, and it really goes to show who's giving these people these scripts, because there was another movie back in 2016 called Arrival, and it had to do about quote-unquote aliens. But the noise the woman is making in Steven Spielberg's movie sounds very similar to the noise that these aliens in this movie are making, a clicking sound. What's also even more interesting is that the bird also played an important role in this movie as well, because it was used to test atmospheric conditions, but also the sensitivity of language between nature and the alien communication, and it was also used as a foreshadow. What I also found interesting about the movie Arrival is that from time to time we would always see these black rings, these black smoke rings popping up in certain locations, and they would be on the news. And the thing is, they would try to say, oh, that's just exhaust from a truck or a transformer had blown. They would never show or track the source. It was always just a theory. But if it was just that, why would they always show it on the news? And these black rings are very similar. Matter of fact, they look exactly like these black rings that are shown in the movie. And these black rings are the communication used by these quote-unquote aliens. So again, it's very telling where these directors are getting this information from, because this is just way too similar. And yes, what was shown by Steven Spielberg was just a trailer, but even so, just looking at the trailer by itself and then going back to the movie The Arrival, you would think that trailer was for the sequel to the movie The Arrival. This is just more conditioning people about aliens, getting people used to the idea of aliens, they exist, their arrival. Perhaps even getting people used to the idea that people that are among us, like I said in my other video, 1 billion plus people are not even real people. They're probably something else altogether. Think reptiles and things like that. And talking about Project Bluebeam, these are the things also we will be seeing during Project Bluebeam. What's going to kick everything off by 2030, this whole one world agenda. These creatures, they are not fake. The lie happens to be that they are aliens from another planet, planet 33, that's 33,000 light years away. That's the lie. These are things that have always been here, entities, things crossing over from CERN, fallen ones, what they have been creating and working with in these deep underground military bases. These are the things that will be released. They are just going to go all out. They're going to use a mix of AI, CGI, holograms. They're going to have things that you can hear inside your head. Matter of fact, something very similar happened in one of these wars where they were going to make people see their prophet. You can go to this article right here from The Guardian, which was published on February 2000, and this article is titled, "Bring Down the Wrath of God on Evil Men," and it goes on to say, "We are in Baghdad in 1991, and something strange is happening. A hush falls over the city as a huge shimmering face materializes in the sky. Soldiers and citizens prostrate themselves as each hears the voice of Allah coming from within, commanding them to overthrow the evil and treacherous Saddam Hussein. Within minutes, an angry mob is storming the palace as the guards flee." This was proposed by the United States Air Force planners to have a complete victory in the Gulf conflict, but listen to this. The Baghdad plan involved projecting a giant hologram over Iraq. They would do this by using mirrors to project an image of Allah. This wasn't something that was laughed off, like they presented this idea and the higher up said, "Get out of here, that's nuts." No, the only thing that stopped them was the fact that they did not know what Allah looked like. Reading this part right here, it says, although the plan had major technical hurdles to overcome, the main reason for rejecting it were cultural. Images of Allah were forbidden in Islam. How can you project an image of God when nobody knows what he is supposed to look like? So it wasn't the fact that they had the lack of technology to do this. No, what stopped them was the fact that could they truly convince people what Allah looked like? So just imagine what they have by 2030 if something like this back in 1990 was not crazy to them. Some people out there say, well, Project Bluebeam is already out there. It's already spoken about a lot. The government will not do it. But you have to remember, there are a lot of quote-unquote conspiracy theories out there, base level ones, easy ones, that people do not believe are real. And anybody that talks about them, they call them crazy, kooky, crackpot conspiracy theorists. So there's that. But this section went on a little bit longer than I thought, but I do want to go ahead and talk about this next. So this is a very weird update when talking about Claudio Neves Valente, the individual who opened fire at Brown University and gunned down the MIT director, Nuno Loureiro.
In terms of what was said, I don't know any more today than what I told you yesterday, or the day before. There are some witnesses who said he said nothing. There are some that say he made a barking noise. Don't ask me. I don't know why. And that's it. There is no other spoken word beyond that we are aware of as we stand before you tonight. And we have spoken to everybody that we have been able to locate who's been inside that building.
So yeah, as he was shooting, people heard him barking like a dog. But it gets even more bizarre because news and media are releasing statements from classmates he went to school with over 25, 30 years ago. What? And keep in mind, none of his employers, his former employers, none of his co-workers, none of his friends or family members have made a statement about this man yet, just his classmates. This kind of reminds me of Thomas Matthew Crooks because people from his school, who he went to school with, started to come out and describe him. When it came to Thomas Matthew Crooks, he was over 20 years old, and yet news and media kept interviewing people he went to elementary school and middle school with, and you can just tell these people are so scripted.
I've only seen him on the bus, and he just kept to himself. No one talked to him. Everybody left him alone because we didn't feel a need to talk to him if he wasn't going to talk to us.
He was quiet, but whenever he was asked a question, he was always very polite about it. He knew what he was talking about, and so it was never something that he was rude to teachers. Like I said, my history teacher loved him, and my history teacher was a great person. I never doubt his judgment, so, that was what was shocking for me, was seeing someone who had been seen as such a good person in class have this outcome. It was just a shock to me.
I just know he was bullied. I don't want to say he was an outcast, but he was, you know how kids nowadays, he didn't dress like everyone else, so everyone kind of put a target on him. He sat alone in lunch.
So apparently what they're doing is trying to build a connection between Neves Valente and Nuno Loureiro, saying they both went to school at MIT between 1995 and 2000. They said he was smug and difficult, again like they said about Thomas Matthew Crooks. One classmate, Felipe Morris, said that engineering course was full of gifted students, but Neves Valente stood out for good and bad reasons. Claudio was obviously one of the best, but in class, he had a great need to stand out and show that he was better than the rest. Claudio's attitude was unpleasant. You're really going to remember that after 30 years? Often arguing with colleagues he did not consider brilliant as him, and they probably were not. They were totally unnecessary quarrels which did not help the class at all. Then another classmate came out who wished to not be quoted by name, backed up Moore's Facebook account post and stating that it was authentic. He also said that he was an aggressive classmate. He had a confrontational personality in class. In other words, the other good students would intervene, ask questions, but Claudio liked to say that he was the one who knew. This is so weird. But another classmate gets a lot more descriptive, and remember, this is over 30 years ago at MIT. Claudio was one of the students with the best grades in the course. He was much more theoretical. Nuno was also a good student. He stood out less in terms of grades, but he was a more relaxed person and seemed to have a knack for slightly more applied subjects. Then in 2000, he enrolled at Brown University as a physics student, but did not finish the program. And we have more classmates coming out and describing him, saying that Valente was socially awkward and that he became his only friend at the university. He struggled in the United States, complaining bitterly that classes weren't challenging and that the food was poor. He could be kind and gentle, but he was also volatile as well. He often became frustrated, sometimes angry about courses, professors, and living conditions, recalling that once he had to break up a fight between Valente and another classmate he often insulted. So we can see what they're doing here. They're using his classmates he went to school with years ago to build a profile on him, that he was some socially awkward, angry, violent loner, yet he was kind and caring and brilliant at the same time. The exact same thing we heard from Thomas Matthew Crooks' classmates. Thomas Matthew Crooks was a grown man. Again, he had a full-time job, graduated college, and all news and media did was interview people he went to school with back in 8th grade, like for example this bumbleclot that's clearly reading from a script.
Thomas was a quiet kid unless there was something that he was passionate about, politics being one of them. He just did not like politicians, especially with the choices that we've had. He did not like our politicians. It was especially during 2016. It was Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, all of them. He showed that he disliked all of them. Did not like any of them. So I brought up the fact that I'm Hispanic and, I'm for Trump. And he said, well, you're Hispanic, so shouldn't you hate Trump? And I was like, no, he's great. I mean, like, he's a great president. And he called me stupid, or insinuated that I was stupid. He's like, well, that's kind of stupid. If he was a know-it-all. So, like, once again, if he was passionate about something, he would just talk, and acted like he knew everything, especially politics related. And he would say it in a tone that was like, I'm better than you, in a type of way. And, meanwhile, it's like, dude, we're in the same classes.
So Claudio Neves went to MIT in 1995 and Brown in 2000. All these classmates are describing him like they describe every other individual that does a school pow. And then as he's pushing 50, now he takes his aggressions out on the schools and anybody linked to the schools. Does that even sound logical? This man, Claudio Neves, probably had multiple jobs, multiple careers between the time he went to school and now. And you mean to tell me they are going to go ahead and push an angle that one day he just suddenly remembered that he was made fun of, picked on, bullied at the schools he went to, and then he decided to target them? This is the angle we're going with. But this gets even better because Brown University, a university that has over 1,000 cameras known for its surveillance, did not produce one photo or video of the suspect. In an archived Brown website, Neves Valente appears to write to classmates that he left the school permanently. The note, first reported by the New York Times, includes an email address to reach him and a cryptic note. The best liar is he who is able to fool himself. They are everywhere, but sometimes proliferate in the most unexpected places. So we're hearing from his classmates, but why don't we hear anything about what he may have been currently working on or what he was a part of, given the fact they're trying to make him sound like he was a brilliant mind in physics, one of the best at MIT? I mean, he had to do something big because his last known address was a 2-bedroom condo in a gleaming waterfront high-rise in Miami, Florida, worth at least $900,000 according to records. Now, I don't know about other states, but in Florida, that is considered expensive given the median price of homes. So he wasn't just working any type of job, and the only information we get about his employment comes again from his classmates. You can't make this up. It says, after leaving his graduate studies and returning to Portugal, the last his former classmates heard was that he worked as an IT specialist for Portugal Telecom for a few years. This is weird, and this is really suspicious, because probably he, the 2 students at Brown, and we do know it's a fact that Nuno Loureiro was a part of Commonwealth Fusion Systems, so they were probably all working on this together, bringing their research together. What Nuno Loureiro was working on at Commonwealth Fusion Systems was an electrical grid with about 400 megawatts of clean, zero-carbon power, a firm source customers can count on having when they need it. Then they go on to say that they will build thousands more. It's a pathway for abundant clean energy that can meet the rising demand for electricity and expand global energy access. See, the problem happens to be is that this was going commercial and it would be affordable. Reading this part right here, it says, Arc Power will be affordable. Arc Power will be the lowest cost source of clean, firm power that can be deployed anywhere. As its technology matures and component costs drop, Arc Power will become even more competitive in the way that solar and wind power have. Their goal was to replace any and all fossil fuel power plants, and they even had plans to operate and build the first arc power plant in Chesterfield County near Richmond, Virginia. Nothing about AI, expanding AI, growing AI. It was all about helping people. And again, they had to have been the real deal because anybody with ties to this, researching into this, are getting taken out. This news story eerily reminds me of the news story that came out back in October, where 3 individuals who worked for Patterson-Wright Air Force Base, an Air Force base that has a lot of very eerie theories behind it, creating all sorts of things. They were scientists for this Air Force base and they all lost their lives. Apparently, supposedly, the husband, Jacob Pritchard, took out his 33-year-old wife and his 25-year-old sergeant, then he took himself out. There has never been any update as to what happened. The motive is still unclear. Anybody can put 2 and 2 together and say that maybe there was an affair going on, but given the story of Nuno Loureiro and Neves Valente, what were these 3 people working on at Patterson-Wright Air Force Base? This even reminds me of news stories like MH370, and you have to ask yourself, even to today, how can an entire major commercial plane just go missing out of thin air with all the technology we have today to track a commercial plane, yet a flight with over 20 semiconductor scientists on board just vanishes? There was also a very odd story I had spoken about on this channel over 2 years ago, where there were a series of events that spanned over the course of 3 years between 1982 and 1985. All these scientists that worked at the same company together, GEC Marconi, all lost their lives in very mysterious ways. Yes, 20 scientists, 3 years, same company, and they were all supposedly working on the Strategic Defense Initiative, the SDI, which was also known as Star Wars under Ronald Reagan in 1983. This program was supposed to intercept missiles while they were still in the air, but who knows what they were really working on, because Ronald Reagan was the president theorized to usher in Project Bluebeam. When it came to these 20 plus scientists that were taken out over the span of 3 years, only one was attributed to natural causes. For example, beginning with Dr. Keith Bowden, a senior computer scientist and SDI contractor for GEC Marconi, one night in March of 1982, after attending a social function in London, Bowden's car veered off a bridge, hurtling down an embankment into an abandoned rail yard. The official account suggested he was drunk driving, but Bowden's wife and solicitor did not buy it. This would mark the beginning of very strange events. For example, in 1985, this individual, Jonathan Walsh, he fell from a hotel window. He actually left GEC Marconi to work for another company, British Telecom, and when he left them, he had expressed fears for his life. Now, I'm not going to go over all 20 plus scientists, but it just gets downright weird. And even outside that 3-year period, for example, in 1986, a 24-year-old scientist working on computer control systems at Marconi jumped 331 feet from a suspension bridge over the Avon River. His body was recovered with his pants around his ankles and a needle-sized puncture wound on his buttocks, something that has mystified the Bristol coroner and has never been explained. And as you just continue to read, they just get more and more bizarre and more suspicious. So it definitely happens. There's a provable history that people who work on very innovative things, they meet with untimely ends. This person actually left a comment on that article about Marconi 2 years ago saying, "My father worked on that project in 1982 to 1983. He worked for a tractor in Austin, Texas. He came home from being gone 2 months, immediately went to see his father in the Navy, and died 2 weeks later. He was run off the road by a van. They were 9 years old at the time this happened. His boss identified his body. Our house was ransacked. There's so much more."
Attorney General Pam Bondi came out with this statement: President Trump is leading the most transparent administration in American history. And she did this the same day that they released an almost completely redacted 109-page document from the Epstein files that they only released because they were legally forced to. And they didn't even release all of it, which is against the law. And the things that they redacted, I'm sure do not fit the guidelines and stipulations that they were supposed to adhere to legally. This is transparency. This is draining the swamp. This is exposing. These are literal pages. These are pages of stuff that they were supposed to release. Congress, the Senate, and Donald Trump himself signed the bill, making it a law that they had to release. The self-glaze about transparency is absolutely ironic, considering this is the same exact day that they proved that they are willing to break the law.
I mean, let's be honest. When it came to the whole Jeffrey situation, and that video came from JD Daily, did anybody else think anything different was going to come up from this? That there were going to be people that were going to be let down of what was going to be shown?
Have you ever noticed how many K's there are in the name Erica Kirk? There's 3. But that's not even what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about why they gave us, the public, access to being able to create AI videos. If you've been following me, then you know that I talk a lot about how AI isn't anything new. It's only new to you. Now, they gave us access to it for a lot of reasons. But one of the main reasons is because this is how they're now going to implement digital IDs. And AI videos is going to be the reasoning behind why they tell us that they need to do it. We already don't know what's real or who or what to believe. But very soon, they're going to claim that they also don't know who's real. They're going to make the claim that AI is too advanced for them to even know if we're real. So it'll become mandatory to have a digital ID to be able to do anything online, because these digital IDs will supposedly be sufficient proof that you're real. But this will also get used against us too, because they'll show you something that supposedly has a digital ID, and that's now proof that that thing is real, but it's just going to be more manipulation. Now, they also gave us AI for another reason. And the reason is because they want you to lose faith in your ability to trust people like me. If everyone has access to AI videos and you're aware of this, then you automatically lose trust in most people. And when you lose trust in most people, you're going to do what's easy. And what's easy is to listen to the ones at the top, because the majority of people's logic is, why would they lie to us? And unfortunately, they do lie to you and manipulate you at every turn.
This is one of the reasons why they gave us AI, but yes, one of the main reasons, it's all about confusion and control, and this allows them to easier control the narrative.
Mel Gibson was completely blacklisted by all of Hollywood? And is it possible it had something to do with the Vatican? Let's search this thing out a little bit deeper. So, Mel Gibson was blacklisted by Hollywood and put on shows like South Park to make fun of him. So let's start by listening to just one statement out of his mouth and go from there.
That some of your worst nightmares were real. It does rip your life to pieces, if you'll let it.
What will destroy your life if you let it?
These little guys, these little heathens with no soul downstairs with horns on their head.
Did you hear that last statement? Something underground, devils, heathens, all that stuff? Like underground, maybe they have soulless entities, demonic entities with horns? Just for entertainment. But when he said that, something very vivid came to mind. Do you remember when the chief exorcist at the Vatican said that Satan was running around there? And it's also addressed by Pope Francis?
Headlines around the world recently when he said the devil was present in the Vatican.
Why would they say such a thing? And I wonder if there's any clues. It's been said for quite some time now. There's a whole bunch of things under the Vatican and in the Vatican Library. That Vatican Library that nobody can go in except for certain people, having to know exactly what they want to look at. By the way, this is not creepy at all. They say it's Jesus, but what it looks like is kind of like Apollo coming from the abyss with all these demons. Many people have hard evidence of demonic things being under the Vatican.
So here in this room, they have a vase which has the image of a Medusa.
So Medusa actually goes quite a ways back, but obviously she has snake, you get it, serpent, for hair. And she also turned people into stone. But turning people to stone, surely that's a myth, right? It has to be a myth. It's not like there's stone sculptures all around the world, especially the Vatican, that are so realistic and could even show things like veils on their head. I wonder if maybe the myths aren't myths, but actual fact. You know, we've also seen something very similar on the line The Witch in the Wardrobe, haven't we? Where people were literally turned to stone. Maybe it's not as far-fetched as we may think. Maybe everything that's a myth is real. Because, of course, we know all the Greek gods were the Nephilim and were the fallen angels, right? Yeah, I don't know if someone sculpted that. Okay, it seems something might be treacherous under the Vatican. What about their theme park in Rome that had these demons on top? And Moloch? How about when they put this sculpture of Moloch right at the Colosseum? I'm sure you know what this god is for, right? The same god as Baal or Baal, the old Canaanite god of the golden calf. You know, I checked this image right here, and it said it was not likely AI. This thing I can't tell you for certain, but some people are alleging that the Scream persona came from the Vatican. They did have artwork, not this, that was just the same though. So what was Mel Gibson so scared of? That said it could destroy a human. And that it was quite literally underground, soulless individuals with horns. I'm not sure.
That great video came from Moon Henry, and I would be very, very surprised if a demonic entity did not lurk under the Vatican. They have a telescope named after Lucifer. Certain scientists come from the Vatican and vice versa.
There's a theory that public schools aren't just taking pictures of students, they're feeding a much bigger system that nobody's talking about. Every single year, schools bring in these random third-party companies to take high-definition photos of millions of kids. And when you really stop to think about it, it's kind of strange. Most parents don't question it. We sign a form, send our kid in a clean shirt, and never think twice. But if you actually look into who owns some of these companies, that's where people online start freaking out. Because when you follow the money, you don't end up at a small photography studio. You end up at a massive data firm, corporations with investments in facial recognition, AI training, and digital identity systems. And suddenly parents online are like, why does a data company want a perfectly lit, perfectly framed, high-resolution photo of my 7-year-old? Here's where the theory gets unsettling. These companies don't just take the photo, they store it, they process it, some even claim legal ownership of every image they capture. And when parents ask them to delete it, a few have literally said no, because that picture is now part of their system. So people are asking, is this really about school pictures, or are schools quietly helping build the next generation of facial data sets starting with our children? I'm not saying it's true, but with how fast digital surveillance is growing, it's not as far-fetched as you think. Stay weird.
I found this video from Beyond Weird to be pretty mind-blowing because today we're constantly talking about facial recognition, facial scanning, data collecting, and so forth. But what if these school photos were always a part of that AI system? Now, you may be saying that these yearbook photos go back to the 1950s, if not before then, but two things. I've always believed that AI is a lot older than what they're telling us, or it could have started as something innocent, but now today it's an easy way for them to collect more data and scan faces, especially with BlackRock and Vanguard being behind a lot of these photo companies. This next video was deleted off my channel yesterday, Minutes of Horror. I'm going to go ahead and repost it here. It's very important. Go ahead and see what other people are talking about. I found this disturbing video off of Barry Stepp's channel.
So far, globally, we are so far above the population and the consumption levels which can be supported by this planet that I know in one way or another it's going to come back down. So I don't hope to avoid that. I hope that it can occur in a civil way, and I mean civil in a special way. Peaceful. Peace doesn't mean that everybody's happy, but it means that conflict isn't solved through violence, through force, but rather in other ways. And so that's what I hope for. That we can, I mean, the planet can support something like 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion, depending on how much liberty and how much material consumption you want to have. If you want more liberty and more consumption, you have to have fewer people. And conversely, you can have more people. I mean, we could even have 8 or 9 billion probably if we have a very strong dictatorship, which is smart. That's, unfortunately, you never have smart dictatorships. They're always stupid. So, but if you had a smart dictatorship and a low standard of living, you can have it. But we want to have freedom and we want to have a high sentence. So we're going to have 1 billion people. And we're now at 7. So we have to get back down. I hope that this can be slow, relatively slow, and that it can be done in a way which is relatively equal, so that people share the experience and you don't have a few rich, trying to force everybody else to deal with it. So those are my hopes. I mean, these are pretty pessimistic hopes, but that's...
First off, I don't believe the population has now 8 billion people. I think it's a lie. I think it's a lot less than that. But given the greater number, for them to say the greater number, it allows them to push forward certain agendas. And even if it was 8 billion people, the Earth can still sustain that and much, much more. There is a lot of vacant land, but the less number of people that you have, the better and easier it is for them to control. They don't give a rat's butt about resources and nature, because if they did, they wouldn't pop up these giant data centers everywhere that are just wrecking the lands. Again, it's all about control. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, as any engagement does help the channel grow. Once again, thank you so much for your support.